My subject is a history of magic, he said. My subject is a history of magic, he said in his dry, wheezy voice. I deal with facts, Miss Granger, not myths and legends. He cleared his throat with a small noise like a chalk snapping, and continued. In September of that year, a subcommittee of Sardian sorcerers. He stuttered to halt. Hermione's hand was waving in the air again. Miss Grant, please, sir, don't legends always have a basis in fact? Professor Binns was looking at her in such amazement. Harry was sure no student had ever interrupted him before, alive or dead. Well, said Professor Binns slowly, yes, one could argue that, I suppose. He peered at Hermione as though he had never seen her, or seen a student proper. He peered at Hermione as though he had never seen a student properly before. However, the legend in which you speak is such a very sensational and even ludicrous tale. But the whole class was now hanging on Professor Binns' every word. He looked dimly at them. Every face turned to his. Harry could tell he was completely thrown by such an unusual show of interest. Oh, very well, he said slowly. Let me see. The Chamber of Secrets. You all know that Hogwarts was founded over 1,000 years ago. The precise date was uncertain, by the four greatest wizards and witches and wizards of the age. The four schoolhouses are named after them. Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowland Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin. They built the castle together, far from prying muggles. Muggle-eye, for it was the age when magic was feared by common people. And witches and wizards suffered much persecution. He paused, gazed blurrily around the room, and continued. For a few years, the founders worked harmoniously together, seeking out youngsters who showed signs of magic and bringing them to a castle to be educated. But then disagreements sprang up between them. A rift began to grow between Slytherin and the others. Slytherin wished to be more selective about the students admitted to Hogwarts. He believed that magical learning should be kept within all magical families. He disliked taking students of Muggle parentage, believing them to be untrustworthy. After a while, there was a serious argument on the subject between Slytherin and Gryffindor, and Slytherin left the school. Professor Binns paused again, pursing his lips, looking a little like a wrinkled old tortoise. Reliable historical sources tell us this much, he said, but these honest facts have been obscured by the fantastical legend of the Chamber of Secrets. The story goes that Slytherin had built a hidden chamber in the castle, of which the other founders knew. Other founders knew nothing. Slytherin, according to the legend, sealed the Chambers of Secrets so that none would be able to open it until his own true heir arrived at the school. The heir alone would be able to unseal the Chamber of Secrets, unleash the horror within, and use it to purge the school of all who were unworthy to study magic. There was a silence as he finished telling the story, but it wasn't the unusual sleepy silence that filled Professor Binns' classes. There was an unease in the air as everyone continued to watch him, hoping for more. Professor Binns looked truly faintly annoyed. The whole thing is arrant nonsense, of course, he said. Naturally, the school has been searched for evidence of such a chamber many times, by the most learned witches and wizards. It does not exist. A tale told to frighten the gullible. Hermione's hand was back in the air. Sir, what exactly do you mean by horror within the chamber? That is believed to be some sort of monster, which the heir of Slytherin alone can control, said Professor Binns in his dry, reedy voice. The class exchanged nervous looks. I tell you, the thing does not exist, Professor Binns, shuffling his notes. There is no chamber and no monster. But, sir, said Seamus Finnegan, if the chamber can only be opened by Slytherin's true heir, no one else would be able to find it, would they? Nonsense of flattery, said Professor Binns in an abrogated tone. If a long succession of Hogwarts headmasters and headmistresses hadn't found the thing. But, Professor, piped up Parvati Patil, you'd probably have to use dark magic to open it. Just because a wizard doesn't use dark magic doesn't mean he can't, Miss Pennyfeather, snapped Professor Binns. I respect the likes of Dumbledore. But maybe you've got to be related to Slytherin, so Dumbledore couldn't, began Dean Thomas, but Professor Binns had enough. That will do, he said sharply. It is a myth. It does not exist. There is not a shred of evidence that Slytherin ever built so much as a secret broom cupboard. I regret telling you such a foolish story. We will return, if you please, to history, to solid, believable, variable fact. And within 5 minutes, the class had sunk back into its usual torpor. I always knew Salazar Slytherin was a twisted old loony, Ron told Harry and Hermione as they fought their way through the teeming corridors at the end of the lesson to drop off their bags before dinner. But I never knew he started all this pure blood stuff. I wouldn't have been in his house if you paid me. Honestly, if the Sorting Hat had tried to put me in Slytherin, I'd got the train straight back home. Hermione nodded furiously, but Harry didn't say anything. His stomach had just dropped unpleasantly. Harry had never told Ron and Hermione that the Sorting Hat had seriously considered putting him in Slytherin. He could remember, as though it were yesterday, the small voice that had spoken in his ear when he had placed the hat on his head a year before. You could be great, you know. It's all here in your head. And Slytherin would help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that. But Harry, who had already heard of Slytherin's house's reputation for turning out dark wizards, had thought desperately, not Slytherin. And the hat said, "Oh well, if you're sure, better be a Gryffindor." As they shunted along the throng, Calvin Creevey went past. "Hiya, Harry." "Hello, Colin," said Harry automatically. Harry, the boy in my class had been saying you're..." But Colin was so small he couldn't fight against the tide of people bearing him towards the great hall. They heard him squeak, "See ya, Harry," and he was gone. What's the boy in his class saying about you?" Hermione wondered. "That I'm the Slytherin heir, I expect," said Harry, his stomach dropping another inch or so as he suddenly remembered the way Justin Filch had run away from him at lunchtime. "People here believe anything," said Ron in disgust. The crowd thinned, and they were able to climb the next staircase without difficulty. "Do you really think there's a Chamber of Secrets?" Ron asked Hermione. "I don't know," she said, frowning. "Dumbledore couldn't cure Miss Norris, and that makes me think that whatever attacked her might not be, well, human." As she spoke, they turned a corridor and found themselves at the very end of the very corridor where the attack had happened. They stopped and looked. The scene was just as it had been that night, except that there had been no stiff cat hanging from the torch bracket, and an empty chair stood against the wall bearing the message, "The Chamber of Secrets had been opened."